Your morning coffee might be the reason you feel exhausted at 2 p.m. Not because caffeine is bad. The research on caffeine is actually quite strong. But the timing. The timing is where almost everyone gets it completely wrong. It's the first thing millions of people do every single morning. Wake up, reach for coffee. And for most of them, that single habit is quietly undermining everything caffeine is supposed to do. And the cost isn't just a slightly worse morning. It's the afternoon crash that won't quit. The tolerance that builds faster than it should. The dependency that creeps in before you even notice. And the slow erosion of your brain's ability to generate its own energy without chemical help. Today, we're going to break down the actual science of what caffeine does inside your brain and why waiting just 90 minutes after waking could change how you feel for the entire rest of your day. Cortisol and the awakening response. Here is what's actually happening in your brain the moment you wake up. Your body runs on a hormonal system that most people never think about. And the most important one in the morning is cortisol. Now, cortisol has a bad reputation. People hear cortisol and they think stress. And yes, cortisol is your primary stress hormone. But in the morning, it's doing something completely different. It's doing something essential. When you wake up, your cortisol levels spike. Scientists call this the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. This spike typically begins within 5 minutes of waking, peaks somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes after you open your eyes, and then gradually starts to decline. What does this cortisol spike actually do? It mobilizes glucose into your bloodstream. It activates your immune system. It sharpens your alertness. It raises your body temperature. It tells every cell in your body that the day has started. In other words, cortisol is your body's built-in stimulant. It's already doing the job that you think coffee is doing. The cortisol awakening response isn't a minor blip. Research published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology has documented that this morning spike can increase cortisol levels by 50 to 160% above baseline. That is a massive natural energy surge that your body generates automatically for free every single morning, and most people immediately suppress it with caffeine. What caffeine actually does. Do too. Understand why timing matters. You need to understand how caffeine actually works inside your brain. Caffeine does not give you energy. That is, perhaps, the most important sentence in this entire video. Caffeine does not create energy. What it does is block your perception of fatigue. Here is how. Throughout the day, your brain is constantly producing a chemical called adenosine. Adenosine is a byproduct of neural activity. Every time a neuron fires, adenosine builds up as a kind of metabolic waste product. As adenosine accumulates, it binds to receptors in your brain and creates an increasing sense of tiredness. The longer you're awake, the more adenosine builds, the sleepier you feel. This is called adenosine pressure. It's a core part of your circadian rhythm and your sleep drive. When you sleep, your brain clears adenosine. This is actually a key function of deep sleep adenosine clearance. You wake up with low adenosine levels, which is why, in theory, you should feel rested in the morning. Now, here's where caffeine enters. Caffeine's molecular structure is very similar to adenosine, so similar that it fits into the same receptors. When you drink coffee, caffeine floods those receptors and physically blocks adenosine from attaching to them. Your adenosine is still there, it's just not being registered. You don't feel tired because your brain can't read the signal. This is important because it means caffeine is not energizing you. It is hiding fatigue. The adenosine is still there, queuing up, waiting. The moment caffeine's effect wears off, usually 4 to 6 hours later, all that adenosine floods the receptors at once. This is the crash. Why morning? Caffeine makes the crash worse. Now let's bring cortisol back into the picture because this is where it gets interesting. When you drink coffee immediately upon waking, your cortisol is already near its peak. You are adding a stimulant on top of a stimulant. The cortisol is already elevating your alertness, mobilizing energy, sharpening your cognition. The caffeine is essentially redundant, except it isn't just redundant, it's actively counterproductive. Here's why. Your body regulates cortisol production based on feedback signals. When it detects that your alertness is already very high thanks to the caffeine, it actually downregulates how much cortisol it releases in response to the awakening signal. You're teaching your body, over time, that it doesn't need to produce as much cortisol in the morning because you're supplementing with caffeine anyway. The result? Over weeks and months of morning coffee drinking, your natural cortisol awakening response gradually weakens. Your body starts producing less of its own morning stimulant because it has learned to rely on the external one. This is one of the primary mechanisms behind caffeine dependency. It's not just psychological. You are literally training your biology to need caffeine not to feel good, but just to feel normal. There is also the adenosine angle. In the morning, right after sleep, adenosine levels are already low. Your brain doesn't need much help clearing fatigue because sleep has already done that. If you drink caffeine when adenosine is still low, you're not blocking much. The receptors are already mostly clear. The effect of that morning coffee is far weaker than it would be 90 minutes later. Meanwhile, you're spending your caffeine window the period before significant tolerance kicks in during a time when your body was already handling things on its own. The 90-minute protocol, what should you actually do? The recommendation you'll hear from neuroscientist, Dr. Andrew Huberman, who has done extensive work on circadian rhythms and neuroscience, is to wait approximately 90 to 120 minutes after waking before consuming caffeine. The logic is straightforward. By 90 minutes, your cortisol has peaked and begun its natural decline. Adenosine is starting to rebuild not dramatically, but enough that caffeine now has something meaningful to block. You get more effect from the same dose of caffeine. You protect your cortisol awakening response instead of suppressing it. And you avoid stacking two stimulants on top of each other. This has practical downstream effects. People who shift their caffeine intake later in the morning consistently report less severe afternoon crashes. Because your caffeine is working with your hormonal curve, not against it, the effect lasts longer and wears off more smoothly. Reduced tolerance buildup over time. When you're not wasting caffeine during the cortisol peak, you tend to need less caffeine overall to get the same effect. Better natural morning energy over weeks. Because you're allowing the cortisol awakening response to do its job undisturbed, your body continues to produce robust morning cortisol rather than gradually relying on you to provide the stimulus. What to do in those 90 minutes? The obvious question is, what do I do for 90 minutes before I can have coffee? This is where the protocol gets practical. First, hydrate immediately. After 7 to 8 hours of sleep, you wake up mildly dehydrated. Before anything else, drink 16 to 20 ounces of water. This alone improves cognitive performance more than most people realize. Even mild dehydration, as little as 1 to 2% of body weight, measurably reduces attention, working memory, and processing speed according to research published in the Journal of Nutrition. Second, get light exposure. Natural sunlight in the morning, even through clouds, sends a powerful signal to your circadian rhythm. It helps anchor your cortisol awakening response, sets your melatonin suppression for the evening, and improves mood and alertness within minutes. Even 5 to 10 minutes outside or near a bright window makes a measurable difference. Third, move. This doesn't have to be a full workout. Even a 10-minute walk significantly increases dopamine and norepinephrine, the neurochemicals most associated with focus, motivation, and executive function. Movement in the morning is one of the most evidence-backed ways to support cognitive performance throughout the day. Fourth, eat something if you're hungry. Protein and fat in the morning provide steady substrate for neurotransmitter production without the insulin spike and crash that comes from high-sugar foods. By the time you've done these 4 things hydrated, gotten light, moved briefly, eaten 60 to 90 minutes have passed naturally. Your coffee is now earned, and it will work noticeably better. This kind of research is what Cognitive Insight Lab covers every week, If you want to keep up, subscribing takes 2 seconds. Caffeine and tolerance. The bigger picture, let's zoom out for a moment and talk about tolerance because this is where a lot of people get stuck. Caffeine tolerance is real. It's documented and it builds faster than most people think. Regular caffeine consumption causes your brain to upregulate adenosine receptors. It literally grows more receptors to compensate for the ones being blocked. More receptors means you need more caffeine to achieve the same degree of blockade. This is classic tolerance. The cycle looks like this. You need caffeine to feel normal in the morning. You drink more over time to compensate for tolerance. You get more of the crash as your tolerance increases. You drink more to counter the crash. Repeat. The 90-minute delay is a modest but meaningful tool for slowing this cycle. When you're not using caffeine as a cortisol replacement, you tend to consume less total caffeine per day. Lower total consumption means slower tolerance development. There's also a case to be made for periodic caffeine resets, sometimes called caffeine cycling. Going caffeine-free for 10 to 14 days every few months allows adenosine receptors to down-regulate back toward baseline. After a reset, you'll find that lower doses of caffeine produce significantly stronger effects. Some people find that after a reset, half their normal dose works just as well as the full dose did before. The L-Theanine Stack more thing worth mentioning. If you've never tried pairing your caffeine with L-theanine, it's one of the most well-studied and consistently supported cognitive stacks in the research literature. L-theanine is an amino acid found naturally in green tea. On its own, it produces a state of calm alertness relaxed without being sedated. When combined with caffeine, it modulates caffeine's effects in a specific way. It takes the edge off the jitteriness and anxiety that some people experience, while preserving and, by some measures, enhancing the focus and alertness benefits. A 2008 study published in Nutritional Neuroscience found that the combination of 97 mg of caffeine with 40 mg of L-theanine significantly improved both speed and accuracy on cognitive tasks compared to either compound alone. The commonly used ratio is approximately 1:2 for every 100 mg of caffeine, 200 mg of L-theanine. Many people find this combination produces sharper, cleaner focus with less of the overstimulated feeling that caffeine alone can produce. If you're currently taking caffeine alone and finding it either too jittery or too short-lived, the timing shift plus the L-theanine addition could meaningfully change your experience. Common objections. Let's address the objections, because they're real. I can't function before coffee. This is tolerance talking. Your baseline has shifted. The cortisol that should be getting you up and running has been suppressed over time. Give the protocol 2 to 3 weeks before judging. The first few days will feel rough. That's the recalibration. I've been drinking coffee in the morning for 20 years and I'm fine. Fine is a low bar. The question isn't whether you're surviving. It's whether your brain is performing at anywhere near its natural capacity in the morning, or whether you've simply normalized a suboptimal state. 90 minutes is too long to wait. It doesn't have to be exactly 90 minutes. Even delaying by 30 to 45 minutes clearing the cortisol peak before caffeinating will produce some benefit. Start where you can and work toward the longer delay. I drink decaf in the morning. Decaf still contains some caffeine, typically 15 to 30 milligrams per cup, and there is some evidence that the ritual of drinking coffee, independent of caffeine, may affect cortisol through conditioned response. The safest morning option for allowing full CAR expression is plain water. The bottom line is this. Your brain is remarkably good at managing its own energy systems when you let it. The cortisol awakening response is one of the most powerful natural cognitive tools you have, and most people suppress it every single morning without knowing it. Caffeine isn't the enemy. Poorly timed caffeine is. Shift your first cup to 90 minutes after waking. Hydrate first. Get some light. Move a little. And then drink your coffee. You'll notice the difference within a week. If you want to go deeper on how to optimize your cognitive performance across the full day, not just the morning, check out the link in the description. We have a full breakdown of the most research-backed nootropics in focus, strategies on the Cognitive Insight Lab blog. The information in this video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider before making changes to your supplement or nutrition routine.